Hi everybody and welcome to today's Greater Manchester Transport Committee. Item 1, Lindsay, have we any apologies?
Yes, we've got apologies from Councillor Warren Bray at Salford.
Okay. Barry Warner, no, Councillor Barry Warner's here, I think. So I'll just be speaking to him. So Barry's arrived.
Yeah, right, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you very much. Item 2, Chair's announcements. I'd just like to welcome all the operators to today's meeting. At the moment, I seem to have I've got Dan from Network Rail. I've got Lucia from TPE. I've got Charlie from Avanti. Leslie from Nexus. Nigel from Go Northwest and Alistair from Arriva. Is there any other operators there would you like to acknowledge now, please? No? Okay, thank you very much. Item 3, declarations of interest. Have we any declarations, Lindsay?
Yes, one received from Councillor Phil Burke from Rochdale as an employee of Metrolink.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So item 4, minutes of the GMTC meeting on the 11th of December. Can we approve those minutes, please?
Agreed.
Approved.
Yes, thank you. Now, item 5, minutes of the GMTC subcommittees held in January. Okay, the bus service committee, can you move those, Roger, please?
Yeah, I'll move those and I've no other comments to make. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Doreen, can you move the Metrolink?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Hang on.
Oh, go on, Doreen.
Right.
Doreen, are you moving those? Yeah.
Yes, Chair.
Do you want to make a
Yes.
comment?
Yes, I do.
Right.
It's on page 21 and it's just a typing error. It says comments raised by bus operators where it should be train operators. Okay, thank you.
Okay, can we change those minutes? Thank you. Has anybody got any questions on those minutes? No? Okay, thank you very much. Item 6, GMTC work programme. We've got Bob. Oh, it's Gwen.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, members, you've got in your papers the work programme for the remainder of the planned meeting of this municipal year. That's there for noting.
Okay, has anybody got anything to raise on those? No? Okay. Thank you very much. Item 7, transport network performance, and now I am definitely bringing in Bob. Cheers, Bob.
Good morning, everybody. It's the usual report, update from 2 months ago. I'll just give a brief summary, then be happy to take any questions at the end. Patronage on the network has been significantly affected by lockdown 3. The biggest reduction has been in the rail base modes, carrying around 18% of pre-pandemic. Road traffic has been the least impacted at 74% of pre-pandemic. The impacts have not been as severe as lockdown 1, but have been greater than lockdown 2. And during lockdown 3, we've seen a gradual week-on-week increase across all modes and to a greater extent than any of the previous lockdowns. During the period, Metrolink performance has been good, the main impact being from Storm Christoph, but this was relatively small in comparison to delays experienced by the heavy rail network. Heavy rail performance has remained strong. We have seen a change in timetables on the 18th of January, mainly a reduction in frequencies and de-strengthening, i.e. reducing the number of carriages on some services. As previously mentioned, the Northwest Rail network was significantly impacted by Storm Christoph, with a lot of lines suspended. For Buzz, we saw a timetable change at the end of January, reducing the mileage to around about 85% of pre-COVID mileage, and around 40% of school services were suspended. On the highway network, traffic remained high in comparison to the other public transport modes, with any congestion and delays caused by weather or roadworks. The weather also impacted cycling and walking, seeing a reduction during this period. There was also a reduction in crime and antisocial behaviour, but I'll leave the detail of that to the next item. As I said, happy to take any questions, Chair, or invite any comments from the operators.
Okay, any operators? Has anybody got any questions? Unless I've got John.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just a couple of questions actually. Just on 3.21 regarding the multi-operator products, is there any sort of update on what's being done in relation to that? And then just a question about cycling, really. And so you said, Bob, that the reduction was due to bad weather. I just wondered whether there was any difference between the routes that we spent an awful lot of money on, the B routes, whether cycling figures have held up on those specific routes as opposed to the general cycling numbers. And then just on page 43, the network safety. I just wondered whether this was a typo or whether this is just the most recent figures available. The killed and seriously injured number, it says August to August 19 rather than August 20. Is that a typo, or do we get this information very late on in the year?
I'll take them in order. The multi-operator ticket, there's no further movement on that. The difficulty is that the ticket machines on board the bus vehicles are not live, they operate offline, and until a solution can be found for that, that product will remain suspended through that channel. With regards to the B routes, can I come back to you on that one, Councillor Leach, because I'm not certain if we've got the granularity. We've only got a fixed number of cycle counters around the region, but let me see what I can dig out on that one. And I presume that 2019 is a typo, but again, if it's any different, I'll let you know.
Okay, bring in Steve.
Well, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points there. Obviously, we're seeing that it's still down significantly, but it is continuing to grow in that sense. So I mean, I think it's I'm not overly worried at this particular point on the usage of transport, particularly in that sense of it. But I think it will be important as we move out of lockdown to sort of see how the share of all those figures across the different modes actually shift as we sort of move back to some form of normality, which probably is on the cards, certainly for post-Easter, I imagine, in that sense. One thing that I was interested in, though, obviously, when I was looking on the active travel, I did notice, obviously, we do expect at this time of year when the snow drifts and all sorts of things, we are going to see a downturn in that particularly. But obviously, one of the things I noted on that was obviously this was actually on weekdays, not at weekends, so presumably that's commuting type traffic. Have we any idea whether or not that those are transferring onto either public transport or perhaps using a vehicle? It'd be interesting analysis if we had that, because then it would actually guide our work in the future to come. So thank you for that. It's a really excellent report, and a lot of information there, and it's obviously really in depth, which is really helpful. Thank you, Chair.
With regards to the change in the volumes across the modes, we can't 100% guarantee that somebody's leaving a bus and going into a car or vice versa. But what we can see is trends, and particularly by areas. What we do is track some of the mobile phone data, and hopefully that gives us an indication. So as that starts to grow, as we come into the recovery phase, we will keep reporting back on any shifts.
Okay, Phil? You're on mute, Phil.
Cheers. Thanks, Chair. Morning, Bob. It's just a quick comment and a question, if I can. First of all, can we thank all the operators for the services they've provided over the last couple of months, especially throughout COVID and especially the bad weather. We had fears that we might have lost more services, but they've worked really hard to keep the services they've provided. The question is, Bob, have you had any proposals from any of the operators if they're going to offer the COVID-19 jabs to frontline staff, especially the people who are in close contact with the public? Thank you.
Bob?
So with regard to the prioritisation of frontline staff, we've made representation to the Department for Transport, who will no doubt feed that into central government. But you probably heard on the news this morning that they're still basing priority of vaccination around age. We are taking up any opportunities we can, and I think that's particularly happened at Metrolink depot, where there's been vaccine available at the end of the day. So Metrolink employees have been able to get round there and get the jab, which is good. What we'd like to be able to do is that on a wider basis, but that's not queue jumping, that's just making certain no vaccine is wasted.
Thank you.
Okay, Phil. Right, can't see any more people asking for comments, so I'll move on. Thank you very much for that. Item 8, Travel Safe Partnership Annual Report. Bring in Bob first, and then I've got Lucy and Kate afterwards. Bob?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. This is the annual report we do on the Travel Safe partnership. It wasn't due until March, but we decided from some of the comments we had previously to bring this forward. We're not going to go through the report in detail, but we've decided to use a slide presentation to try and bring it alive, and we've got the key members of the team here to be involved in that. So I'd like to hand over to Lucy for the presentation.
Morning all. Can you hear me?
Yes, Lucy, I can hear you.
Fantastic, thank you. I should just, before we get started, just confirm we have also got Chief Superintendent Wasim Chowdhury and Chief Inspector Gareth Firth joined the call as well today from the Greater Manchester Police Transport Unit, just so that there's a few of us here who can field any questions. Kate, can you just move on to the first slide, please? Fantastic. So just really by way of a bit of background to start with, you'll all be aware we work to a joint overarching travel safe strategy that outlines, excuse me, 3 strategic aims, which are around improving that perception of safety, managing instances of crime and antisocial behaviour, and also the discouraging of fare evasion. We have during 2020 been able to actually grow the partnership, and that's been built to some extent on the collaboration and relationships that have developed through the Transport Cell, one of the COVID-19 response structures. And so Arriva, Go Ahead and Diamond have now formally joined the partnership in 2020, and very recently Northern also as well. Travel Safe, it's a partnership of collaboration, but without any independent financial standing. So all the different members sign up to work jointly, but recognising that we all bring different tools and capabilities and can contribute to problem solving in different ways, whether that's frontline staff, whether that's the different tactics that we've got, or whether that's reporting information and intelligence. Another point that I'll just make before I move on, which it is in the report but not on this slide, is just that Travel Safe also now formally reports into the Police and Crime Steering Group, and we form part of the Standing Together work plan. There's some big benefits for us in that, in terms of building and strengthening the working relationships that we've got with other Greater Manchester key partnerships, particularly serious and organised crime, and also the GM community safety leads as well. Next slide, please, Kate. So just dipping in then into some of the headlines. I'll take bus first of all, and by bus we include all incidents that are reported to us on bus, at stop, but also interchanges and stations. So overall, really positive, with a 45% reduction during 2020 of reported incidents of crime and antisocial behaviour compared to that of 2019. And that's been driven by a 60% reduction in those on the bus or at bus stops, but also 26% overall at those occurring at interchanges. Next slide, please, Kate. In terms of Metrolink, we're seeing a similar position with a 20% reduction of reported incidents of crime and ASB in 2020. We have included on this slide a line by line breakdown, and I'd just like to pick out in particular the Oldham and Rochdale line, because we've seen a really positive result in terms of a 45% reduction in the number of reported incidents, which that line in particular has been quite a focus of partnership activity during 2020, and I think in fact there's been some joint deployments there only this week that have resulted in some really positive outcomes. And it's through that problem solving and partnership approach that enables us to tap into district structures and take some swifter, earlier interventions such as criminal behaviour orders as well. But we have during 2020 also seen a 27% increase in reports in the city zone. So next slide, please, Kate. So overall then, last year we developed a travel safe KPI to help us measure and benchmark. Essentially what we do is we normalise the data and develop an incident rate per million passenger journeys. So effectively for every million journeys that are taken, there would be an average of X number of incidents. And Transport for London present their data in a similar way, so it helps us to make some more meaningful comparisons. So on this graph in particular, the grey line represents that rate. What you can see is that it's generally been static, but then it rose in the period correlating to the first national lockdown and the COVID restrictions. So also was clearly a dip in the number of reported incidents, so that difference is directly attributable to the fact that there was such a significant drop in the number of passengers travelling. Next slide, please, Kate. So just moving on then to some of the specific activities that we've been undertaking during 2020, and in particular face covering compliance. So whilst levels of compliance are generally high, we do recognise that that in particular has been an area of concern for passengers, for operators, and so we have jointly looked at different ways to continually improve upon that. So we've been using our long established day of action tactic, which have proved particularly valuable on this issue. So we've ramped up that approach around providing passenger reassurance and passenger confidence, and you can see the results there in the infographic, with a number which stands as correct as at the 5th of January. 28 different locations covered, with those locations being determined based on footfall levels, but also where information and intelligence is telling us that we're seeing low compliance with face coverings. One of the things we reported on last year was the quite extensive reach we'd had in terms of schools and community engagement. I think we'd reported around about 30,000 young persons that we'd engage with. Now, clearly, it's not been possible to sustain that during 2020 and COVID. So we've had to refine our approach. We did undertake a number of days of action to areas of the network that were frequented by school-aged children, but what we did find is that they weren't necessarily as receptive, and they didn't result in changing some of those behaviours. So we reviewed and refined the approach that we were taking, and we sent some joint partnership letters to head teachers of 15 schools in the first instance, where we'd seen really low levels of face covering compliance. We also did some staff impact videos with bus drivers and produced a safe travel video that we could share with the schools as a different type of conduit to engage with young persons. Next slide, Kate, and I think at this point I'll hand over to Waz, if that's okay.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee members. So just to summarise here, really, as I talk through the wider infographic, it's to set the context really of Greater Manchester Police's support within the partnership, and particularly through the transport unit, but also much wider through all of transport policing. So the transport unit itself is one cog within that wider wheel. But in terms of our approach, it is very much around that partnership-based problem solving and that engagement at a local policing and neighbourhood level. And as Lucy's mentioned, the issues around Oldham and Rochdale, the success in tackling those has been very integral to local neighbourhood policing teams and that local neighbourhood partnership as well. I think overall, in terms of the challenges that the transport unit look at, it goes broader than simply patrolling and reassurance. You can see there that there's a whole suite of areas that the staff will look at, be that crime, antisocial behaviour, through the proactive work of stop and search, and particular focus, including yesterday, work around the different interchanges, the transport interchanges, looking at weapons, doing searches, engaging with members of the public, and a particular focus on those who are most vulnerable. So that could include missing people and investigating those, homeless people, young children, and trying to just understand people who are using the network and engaging. Throughout this, though, there is that engage, explain, encourage aspect, but there is that enforcement element as well, and that can include the arrests that have taken place there, significant across a range of issues, be that crime, antisocial behaviour, be that drug related, be that theft related, and really to encourage that climate of people feeling safer across the network. What I would also highlight, though, is beyond the tram and the bus networks, is a lot of work that takes place across our road network and our cycle networks as well, and that's a particular focus working with other transport teams around the fatal 5 contributors, which many of you will know that these are 5 sort of key areas that contribute to road traffic collision. So they are careless driving, drink and drug driving, seatbelt issues, mobile phone issues, and speeding. And so the deployment of the team is not just on the tram and bus network, it is wider. It's working with local community initiatives as well, and doing speed check campaigns as well with other colleagues throughout GM. You'll see an observation there that at this moment in time we've had to take a difficult decision of moving a number of staff for a temporary period into our operational communications branch. And the reason for that is, like us, like many sectors at the moment, have been affected by COVID and COVID related sickness. And so one of the key sort of areas for us is enabling the public to make contact through 101 and through 999, and then for a short-term fix due to sickness, staff have been moved into the operational communications branch, but will be returning to the network shortly and working with colleagues on that wider transport infrastructure. There is a link there. We'll touch on that link later as some further slides come. Just next slide then, please, Kate. I'll touch on a few bits here, Lucy, and then I'll bring yourself in. So just some of the things here from a policing perspective that we're looking at are different routes in to members of the public to communicate with us. So using live chat instead of having to phone in. The take-up's been relatively small, but we continue to promote that. We've had some reports in relation to tram and bus networks indeed, which we've managed to respond to, so it was a good route in. Street Watch there, you'll see that's a community initiative with neighbourhood policing and community groups over in Rochdale, and that is around patrol work and information and intelligence sharing. Some work there, preventative, and this, you know, big part of our role collaboratively is on problem solving, and you'll see there that work with the GM Violence Reduction Unit and working with education providers as well to explain the dangers in terms of carrying weapons and engaging in violent behaviour, per se, obviously linked to the transport network in this instance. And some successful outcomes as well there in terms of enforcement and longer term problem solving. You'll see some examples there of criminal behaviour orders where we've had to work as a partnership for longer term justice outcomes to prevent individuals who are causing problems on the network, and where, you know, a short term sentence doesn't appear to be working to deal with that particular individual. So we've got other options in terms of our suite of criminal justice outcomes. Lucy, I don't know if there's anything on this slide that you want to touch on?
No, I think you've covered that off brilliantly. Thank you, Kate. So then just really a bit of a forward look for you. It's absolutely our intention that we'll continue to support the GM response and sort of the issues we see through the use of days of action. In fact, this week we've delivered since July our 50th day of action, which was located at Victoria train station and in conjunction with our newest partner, Northern. So that is quite a significant milestone and undertaking, and really is testament to the benefits of joint working. And I would just say thank you to all the partners who've made those days a success throughout this. As Waz has touched on, we did launch GMP live chat as that conduit for discrete public reporting, and that is something which we're looking to relaunch later in this year when it becomes the most appropriate time. We do need to look at continuing the educational outreach and exploring new novel ways, noting the challenges we've got with engaging with that sector at the moment. We've talked with the unit for some time about the provision of some pedal bikes to support multimodal patrols and active travel. We have actually now delivered, I think, 10 bikes to the unit, which, as we head into spring, lighter nights and the easing of, hopefully easing of lockdown restrictions, I think that'll be a really valuable tool to aid in that reassurance. We're also looking to reintegrate the employee special constables back into the transport unit, and the pilot that we developed in terms of the homelessness Z card, roll that out now across the other 10 districts, because that's a really valuable tool to support frontline staff in interventions and forward signposting for vulnerable persons. So I think then, Kate, the last slide really is just a sort of a 2020 for us in pictures. Number of the different days of action, how we've engaged on across the different modes, handing out face coverings in that kind of proactive approach. And I think that's everything from us.
I just make the point, Chair, about there is a link to a video of the transport unit and how we collectively work, and just encourage committee members to review that outside of this meeting.
Okay, thanks for that, Wazim. Lucy, can you send those out, all the slides out to all members as well, please?
Yes, of course.
Thank you very much. Okay, now I've got 3 people waiting to ask questions. I've got John first.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it was just in relation to the figures in figure 1 on section 2.4 on page 51. And also to the comment in 2.5, which suggests that the level of crime and antisocial behaviour is on the bus network was pretty similar during the COVID period as the previous year, but it looks from the figures as though there was a massive drop during the first lockdown, and then there's been a steadier increase. Has there been in recent months an increase in relative terms in antisocial behaviour, given the lower numbers of people travelling on the bus? And then my second question was specifically about underreporting of crime, because obviously we've had the situation where we found that there has been an underreporting of crime by GMP, and I just wondered whether any of the crime stats in relation to the Travel Safe partnership have been affected by that underreporting.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Who's answering?
Do you want me to come in there, Mark? So just in terms of the bus figures, yes, we did see quite a significant drop off in terms of the number of reports during lockdown 1, and then that has risen, you're right, back to sort of not quite pre-pandemic levels, but that's in some ways linking back to Bob's report earlier. Bus has maintained its patronage levels to a greater extent than some of the other modes of travel, and yes, sorry, I should have said when I presented the slide with the KPI, that was the overall KPI for all modes sort of jointly, but we do break that down mode by mode as well, so that is available for us. And I think probably the question around underreporting was,
I'll just come in on that one. Thanks, Lucy. So we haven't found any evidence to suggest that there is underreporting in this particular area. That said, we are taking this as a holistic piece of work in terms of GMP's response, in terms of recording and underreporting. And I think where we look at this from a transport perspective is the communication routes that we're doing through social media, through GMP's own social media sites, but also through the partnership to encourage that reporting and make sure that is being documented. And part of that is access of members of the public into GMP, and that's why, in addition to live chat, it's about making sure we've got sufficient resilience across our command and control functions, such as the operational communications branch.
Can I just come back, Mark?
Yeah, certainly, John.
Yeah, just in relation. Thank you for that assurance. But just in relation to the figures on incidents on buses, if we took away the first lockdown, since the first lockdown, in relative terms to patronage numbers, are the number of incidents on buses actually increasing? Because that it would appear from these stats that they are.
Chair, if I may.
Bob, yes.
Yeah, you're right. There is a relative increase in terms of the patronage. What we tend to find is some of those who have antisocial tendencies still tend to travel when they don't need to. So yes, we haven't got rid of the undesirables during a lockdown. They just don't care.
I think we've seen that, Chair, on the tram routes as well. So we've seen that, for example, on the airport line, and continue to have that into our patrol plan. So it's not just the bus network, but it is the tram network as well. But we're alert and alive to that.
Sorry, can I just come back once more?
Quick one, John.
Yeah, is one of the issues about there's also more likely to be antisocial behaviour when the buses are more empty, so people feel that they can behave worse when there aren't other people around on the bus, perhaps?
That's the hypothesis that we work towards, in terms of if there is, a greater opportunity, in terms of our communities and problem solving, extra people on networks creates that vigilance and provides that collective sort of social responsibility to tackle issues. So we do know where it does diminish. That's part of our patrolling plan, to even cover not just necessarily the busy routes, but also those that are perhaps lighter.
Okay, so I'm going to move on now to Phil.
Cheers, thanks, Chair. It's just a comment, please. If I can just send our appreciation and thanks to Inspector Andrew Fern in Rochdale, Matthew Iddles at Metrolink, Casey, Lucy and Kate, TFGM, for the fantastic partnership working we've got in Rochdale over the last couple of weekends, and this weekend coming up. We've had some really good operations working closely with Great Manchester Police, the Travel Safe Unit and BTP across the full network on the Oldham and Rochdale line. It's long overdue and the results are really promising, and we just really would like to say a special thanks to Gareth Walker, PC Gareth Walker from Rochdale, for pulling this all together at short notice. The work what he's done has not gone unnoticed by the council. Again, our appreciation to everyone involved. It's a great partnership working and we hope it continues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Pat on the back there, Lucy, was it?
Yes, thank you. I'll pass that on to Gareth and the team as well. I suppose it's for us, but it's as you mentioned there, Councillor Burke, that whole collective sort of partnership approach has been integral to this. I think what we found in the past, where the police have tried to do it in isolation, we've been quite narrow in the problem-solving approach, and this is why the longevity and the success at this point in time is because of that collaboration. So thank you.
Thank you.
I would echo that as well.
Okay. I've got Sean and then Angeliki.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Lucy and Wasim, for running through that presentation with us. Really appreciate, coming from Oldham, the work that's been done on the Oldham and Rochdale Metrolink line after a few serious incidents on there over the years, and we do know that that line is something of or has been something of a hotspot for antisocial behaviour over the last couple of years. My observation as a tram user myself is that the kind of thing that really irritates people is not anything serious, although clearly that's something that needs to be dealt with, but the low-level nuisance of congregating youths on platforms, and then the perception that young people are hopping on and off the trams for 1 or 2 stops and being quite disruptive on the trams while they're on them and clearly not paying. So the kind of patrolling that's been undertaken to tackle that is helpful. One of the things that appears to slip through the gap, or the perception is that it slips through the gap, is patrols and enforcement in and around Metrolink stops themselves. So one of our stops, at least one of our stops in Oldham, and this is Hollingwood, is in a very isolated location. My residents that use that stop say that they feel like when they get off it, particularly at night in the dark, it's not a safe place to be because there are very few people around. And when there are people around, sometimes it's drag races or whatever you describe them as on the multi-storey car park there, and people who are using it as a place out of the way to get up to no good or to do things that you would prefer them not to. So it's who is responsible for the policing in and around stations and areas like that. Is it the local neighbourhood policing team? Is it Travel Safe? Is it a combination of the two? And if it is, well, whatever it is, are you confident that there is enough dialogue and communication between the different parties that are responsible for policing different bits of the network, such that we can tackle problems like that? Because Hollingwood in particular is an issue for many residents in its isolation. Thanks.
Okay, I'll come in first with that one. So I think for me, one, it is a collective responsibility with that. So very much our information and intelligence around local issues starts at that local neighbourhood perspective, but it's also what the transport team, the transport unit, wider Travel Safe are picking up as well. And that's how do we then go about sharing that intelligence to develop that into problem solving activity. So I don't think any one of us can say it's each other's responsibilities. Collectively, it's our joint responsibility to tackle that. And I think that's the success we've seen in other areas. I think around that specific location, I know my Chief Inspector Gareth Firth is on the line and we'll pick that up specifically around some problem solving. What we would do in instances like that is look at what we've got as a partnership, but we'd also bring in other specialist resources if necessary. So, for example, if there are cars that are driving around in an unsocial manner as well, it's how do we bring in some additional traffic resources and start to target those as we've done in other areas of GM. Key to this, I suppose, is it's not just operating, as you've said, those busy areas, it's these smaller areas, because for us, it's about making sure that everyone who uses the network and travels through it not just is safe, but feels safe as well. And so we're not just going to sort of focus on the large areas, we will focus on the localised problem solving of the smaller areas as well. So we'll take that away, particularly to have a further look at.
Mark, just to add to that,
Yes.
I know we talked about the problem solving approach, and some of those lower lying issues. We do the policing side. It obviously is one tactic that we look at, but there's a number of other. So, for example, we work very proactively with the youth engagement teams. We offer free travel for them to support engagement with youngsters who are being seen to hop on and off the transport network. And obviously through the operator Metrolink, through some of the revenue protection gateways that they do, which again are usually intelligence led and targeted at locations where we do see that sort of trend and those problems coming through. Kate or Gareth, I don't know if there was anything further you wanted to add for Councillor Fielding's questions.
No, I've listened to all the concerns, certainly around Hollingwood. You know, Kate and I jointly chair the Travel Safe Tactical Partnership, and we deploy our resources in line with the information intelligence. Certainly, we've not seen any information in relation to Hollingwood, but we do need and crave that information intelligence so we can always consider and realign our deployments. So Kate and I always bang the drum about people talking to us. We can't move our deployments around, we can't move our resources around unless people do, through whatever forum that is. So please, if there is any more information, please continue to pass that through the Travel Safe Partnership, and we will deploy our resources accordingly. Chair, if I can just respond to that.
Sure.
Yeah. Thanks, Gareth. I suppose this is where the problem comes, because the issue with Hollingwood, and I apologise to members on this call that we're getting into an issue that's specific to one Metrolink stop, which is perhaps not what this is for, and I'm happy to take it up outside. But the issue in relation to Hollingwood is that the public realm, the lighting, the location of that stop is not nice. It's out in the middle of nowhere. You very rarely come across anybody when you're walking to and from it, particularly at night. And I think that there probably haven't been huge numbers of incidents that are worthy of reporting through to the police, but the nature of that stop on the line makes Metrolink less attractive as a mode of transport because it is dark and it is isolated, and the perception is just that it is not a safe place to be. And so it's perhaps not a Travel Safe Partnership thing to deal with, but there are significant issues around that stop in relation to the public footpath between the A62, which the majority of people would use as the shortest route, in relation to poor lighting, in relation to getting off it and passing the Greater Manchester Cycle Hub, which is always vandalised and just sets a really bad impression of that kind of area. So there's a bit of work for the council to do, I accept that. But it's just some work needs to be done around that stop specifically, because I have no doubt that it is discouraging people from using the Metrolink network because of how unpleasant an environment it is. Yeah, I think we can probably discuss some of those issues offline, certainly with some of my colleagues from the Oldham district as well. So as Mr. Chowdhury talks about before, that problem solving collaborative approach, I'm sure we can look at those issues offline if you're happy with that, Councillor.
Okay, Kate, have you anything to add?
Yeah, I was just going to make a final point, really. I think most of it's been covered. We do, as a partnership, absolutely look at passenger reassurance. It isn't just about the issues, it is about how people feel on public transport, and we've done on several occasions actually go out and actually recce the lines to have a look at the issues you've raised, so the lighting, the CCTV, the help points, you know, vegetation, etc. So that is something we absolutely do and should consider. And just to reiterate what people have said, we've got really good relationships with Oldham Council, and we work really closely with them. So, you know, as Gareth said, it is something we can pick up and look at offline if those concerns are in the mix.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got Angeliki.
Thank you, Chair. And just to come back on what Stephen has said, it would appear that the capacity to deploy regularly officers to enforce speed limits has significantly diminished over the last few years, and I'm talking about the road network. So consequently, motorists are now flagrantly breaking the law, knowing that they will not face any penalty for doing so. And the residents that I am talking to, they say, why bother to report speeding to the police? They will never do anything. Now, we all know the massive cuts that you have had on the back of 10 years of austerity. However, this is still an issue, and with COVID and less traffic on our streets, perceptions are that this is a bigger issue. So this is also something which is really, really important because it cuts across key strategies of our transport strategy, specifically increasing the level of walking and cycling. So I welcome that, for example, last Saturday, February the 12th, GMP traffic undertook speed enforcement work on Moldeth Road West. So over 45 minutes, you recorded 27 speed offences between 42 and 109 miles an hour on a 30-mile road. We are in a situation where we know this is a huge problem. It happens across the conurbation, but how is this spot checking changing behaviors? Have you got any evidence that it does? Because unfortunately, I don't have a line of sight of sustainable targeted action that changes behaviors. So both TFGM and police should absolutely recognize that there is much to do, and I recognize that there is much to do, and I want to work with you to tackle this. And we need to recognize that one road death is just one too many, and we have had a few in Manchester over the past few months. So could you please tell us some of the precepts for GMP going to go on supporting road safety issues and increasing capacity in this team? How are we going to ensure that people are punished for their behavior so that things change in the future? Are we still waiting for accidents to happen first before we put a speed camera on the roads across the network that we already know that they are problematic? Is there any way we can change that? And the other thing with regards to TFGM and my colleagues as well, I wanted to work with you to tackle this, and tackling behavior is one thing. Another one is the physical interventions that will help us have safer streets. So these issues are currently not tackled via the Mayor's Challenge Fund. I want to ask, is TFGM discussing this in conversations with the government? And are you going to commit to make the case for a discrete fund that will tackle these issues across the conurbation? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll just come in first and just start that discussion rolling. I mean, from our perspective, the transport unit themselves are one resource. I think when we look at it in terms of safer transport across Greater Manchester Police collectively, there are a number of police units and teams that work together to deliver the whole strategy for GM. So some of that you will have seen, as you've referenced there, speed awareness campaigns, the drink and drug campaigns that we also run at seasonal sort of periods as well. And we are taking speeding extremely seriously. We do see that response in terms of where, certainly with the first lockdown, it was most notable as the roads became extremely quiet, and the level of speeding that was well documented. And we continue to ensure that that's part of our response. As an example, yesterday, colleagues from our traffic units who were patrolling, I've got a list here, Bramall Lane South, they were on Bolton Road, Bury Road. They issued 7 summonses there for speeding. Rochdale Road East was another one. Again, offending motorists were summoned as well. So the enforcement activities working there sort of independently. It links in a little bit more as well with some of the community work that takes place with community speed watch campaigns that we're trying to increase and develop. The work that we highlighted in the presentation in Newhay as well at Rochdale. But there's an enforcement element, there's an engineering or environmental aspect that we can do both in terms of road safety, road calming measures, but also the sighting of cameras as well. And what we are bolstering is that analytical sort of effectiveness as a partnership. So within the transport unit, a dedicated analyst looking at where the threats and the demands and are featuring, so we can not just shape our patrolling collectively, but also our problem solving as well. But in terms of speeding itself, hugely important. It's one of those fatal 5 categories that I've mentioned earlier. We had 67 fatal road deaths last year. Each one of those is one too many, I fully agree, and we need to work collectively to tackle that. Now, not all of that was, specifically related to speeding, but it's one of those fatal 5 categories that we do examine. Whether enforcement activity actually has a long-lasting effect is hard to determine. Obviously, there are speed awareness courses that people go on, and the data from that does indicate there are beneficial sort of aspects to that. But in the most serious, we would bypass that and go straight to a prosecution. And what we've also done is we do a huge amount of work around the seizure of vehicles as well. So where we believe either that the insurance isn't there, documents aren't right, or the vehicles are unsuitable for the roads, our key for us is to get them off the roads and get them seized. So that's from a policing perspective.
Okay, Lucy, do you want to come in on there, or is there nothing else to add?
From the Travel Safe Partnerships perspective, no, there's obviously clear linkages into the Casualty Reduction Partnership, the Road Safety Partnership. But yeah, WAS's team through Specialist Operations sit across both of those.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mark?
Yes?
Sorry, I just wondered whether it's appropriate just to answer Councillor Stoyer's broader question of the transport plan and how the different elements also come together here. So there has been some engagement recently around the priorities within the Mayor's Cycling and Walking Fund approach with transport executive members, and we have now started to see some programmes of road crossings coming forward through that programme. So just last month there was a number of crossings that were agreed through the combined authority in Bury, and I know there's a number of other authorities that are bringing those forward as well. So I think we are starting to see that fund being used. Within the report that we'll come on to, there's reference to the Streets for All strategy that we're developing at the moment, and that will be very influential in the proposals that we bring forward to members as we prepare the submission to the Intracity Transport Fund. So I think we are certainly hoping to carry that agenda forward through those additional funding opportunities as they come forward. Some of the aspects are obviously revenue funding, and that I know is a real challenge both for ourselves and police colleagues. But I think we have heard from a number of members, and Councillor Stoyer has very much been at the forefront, I know, in that regard, just how important road safety is being viewed within communities, particularly over the past 12 months. And I know that teams collectively are looking to redouble their efforts in that regard, less so through Travel Safe, as Lucy says, but more through the Road Safety Partnership. And perhaps over the coming months it'd be appropriate for us to bring a little bit more to the committee on the work of the Road Safety Partnership to help to set that out.
Okay, thanks for that, Simon. On a personal note, I just want to thank the work that the team has done over at Wigan and Lee bus stations regarding a conviction. Finally, a big smile on Gareth's face there, because I know he's been involved with that. But realistically, it does make a difference. We need to get that message out to the public out there to let them know that work's being done. And I think, it's easy to say that in meetings and we see it, but the public need to know it a little bit more. And I think more time is need to be spent on making sure us as members send that information out, as well as concentrating on making sure that positive measure gets out at the bus stations, etc., tram stations, train stations, that we need to let the public know that they're there, and the details that they can contact you if there's anything specific that they see when on. Okay, so thank you very much for that. I know Waz has been having some hassles, so please thank him when you finally get connected back again. Okay, thank you. So moving on, item 9, the Transport Strategy Delivery Plan, and I'm going to bring in Simon and Nicola for this, please.
Thank you, Chair. This report we've brought forward in part to highlight to members that the revised transport strategy has now been approved by the Combined Authority alongside a 5-year transport delivery plan, and that will now form our new local transport plan for Greater Manchester, and that's really timely in the context, in particular, of the new funding opportunities that are referred to before, and Greater Manchester demonstrating that we are very clear in terms of where our priorities lie. But what this report looks to set out is that the job's not done, and there's a series of activities now that start to take that agenda forward. And I'm just going to pass across to my colleague Nicola Kane, who leads the team preparing the transport strategy. And Nicola's just going to highlight 1 or 2 of the key activities that will be coming forwards over the next few months.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Chair. So just a very quick overview of what's in the report. As Simon says, we've now approved the refreshed version of the 2040 strategy, which sets out our ambitions for 50% of all trips at least to be made by walking and cycling and public transport by 2040. It's been updated to reflect the key components of the R network ambition that the Mayor set out a couple of years ago, and it also reflects some of the areas which have had sort of increased priority over the last few years, so particularly around development of the B network for walking and cycling, around our ambitions to be net carbon zero by 2038, and also progress that we've made on developing our plans for the Clean Air Plan. So that's really important that now sets out an up-to-date policy framework, and the supporting 5-year delivery plan has been developed in close collaboration with the 10 local authorities. It supports the long-term land use plans for across Greater Manchester, and it's the main focus of that is the 3 investment maps, which you'll see in the document. The first one is the interventions which we're looking which have already got funding and are in delivery. Map 2 is the really critical one for the next 5 years in terms of all the different interventions that we're looking to bring forward over the next 5 years, with a particular focus on continuing to roll out the B network, developing significant proposals for improving buses and quality bus transit in particular, expanding the EV charging infrastructure network, looking at the delivery of bringing on stream the new trams which have now been ordered, and progressing the Clean Air Plan. And importantly, it's just worth flagging that the delivery plan is now supported by 10 local implementation plans. So each local authority area has a dedicated local implementation plan, which is really important in terms of setting out some of those more local priorities, which can sometimes get lost in a Greater Manchester level document. So we're really pleased now to have those documents in place, and they will continue to be developed over the coming months and years. And then, just as Simon said, there are a number of sub-strategies which we're working on, which we'll be bringing forward through the course of the year, around local bus, rapid transit, streets for all, electric vehicles and freight in particular. So those are all coming forward through the summer months. And the next one to be published will be the City Centre Transport Strategy, which TFGM's been working closely with Manchester City Council and Salford City Council in particular to develop. So that's an overview of what's already published and what's to come, and happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Nicola. First of all, I'll pass over to Dory.
Thank you, Chairman. It's on page 67, 4.15. Affairs Principals Group has been established. Who would be in that group?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Dickinson. That's a reference to the workings behind the scene. So it's actually an officer group that's referred to there. Yeah.
So it's not the public, or
it's not at this stage. No members. This is making sure that we've got the right internal capabilities together in the first instance. But clearly over the coming months, we will need to increasingly involve members and, as you rightly say, members of the public in those exercises.
Thanks, Simon.
Thanks, Doreen. Nathan?
Thank you, Chair. Again, well, picking on 66/67, mainly item 4.13 with respect to EV charging points. We've got the congestion zone coming in 15 months, and then we're going to be charging vans in probably 22 months. In Trafford, the council authorised 100 charging points last March, April. It's taken a year to get the procurement in place, and it's still not finished. Surely we've got a carrot and stick here, the charging points being the stick. So the plan was to be completed in January. Is that January and it's complete, or is that January next year? So it doesn't look from this that we're going to have many charging points anytime soon.
So, Chair, just to correct the public record, first of all, that there isn't an intention for any form of congestion zone in Greater Manchester. That there is work that's being carried out at the moment at the instruction of government on the preparation of a clean air plan, which I think is perhaps what the point of reference that Councillor Evans makes. With regard to electric vehicle charging, there is a programme already underway. So over the past 12 months, through the renewed contract, we've upgraded the legacy charging system that we had in place in Greater Manchester, so that we now have fourth generation charging equipment in those locations, as opposed to the initial first generation equipment that we secured funding for a number of years ago. And there is now the rollout of additional charging points, and that is literally happening month by month at the moment in Greater Manchester. And there's a programme that takes us through the next 12 months, supported now by additional funds that were agreed by the Combined Authority through the Transforming Cities Fund at last month's meeting. What this work looks to do is to project further forwards in terms of where we go beyond the initial rollout of the programme, and that does start to become considerably more complex. So, as Councillor Evans referred to, our colleagues in local authorities, Trafford, have been leading this most recently, have now been starting to look at how we best address the neighbourhood issues associated with residential charging points. Obviously, around 40% of homes in Greater Manchester don't have a driveway, and therefore driveway charging won't be an option for a large number of residents. We want to avoid, quite rightly, local authorities want to avoid complications of charging cables on residential streets and pavements, and so a whole collective approach is going to be needed to make sure that those who live in those homes can continue to benefit from electric vehicles, but in a way that works for everybody. And then ultimately, as Greater Manchester, we need to be able to take a view as to the extent to which it's right and proper over time for the public sector to continue to play the role up front, which has very much been the case in recent years, or whether the private sector starts to play the role. And in many ways, this is the same sort of debate that took place around the provision of petrol stations back in the 1940s and 1950s. So here we are all over again as cities having a debate about the new way that we will go about powering our cars. And we've got some of the answers through the initial programme. We know that we need to be able to get kit out there right now to support commercial vehicles in particular, with a particular focus on the taxi trade. But that broader mix of travel, we don't have all the answers for yet, and that's the reason why the additional work around the strategy we think is so important, with a focus on work with government and of course to run up towards COP26 later in the year.
Okay.
May I come back, Chair? You're on mute, Chair.
Yes, if it's quick, no problem.
Okay, so will we have enough infrastructure in place to support our taxi trade as we hit the clean air zone? And do we have any numbers? Do we have any idea of numbers? Do we have an ambition of numbers? And I take your point that the public sector will step in and will step out at some point. But certainly we need to be driving this. That ambition, 50% of the cars sold this year have been electric. So this is going to be a rapid change, and we've got to be ahead of it. Otherwise, people aren't going to change. So numbers and taxi trade.
Yes, we do. There's a mapping exercise as well, actually, of provision, both forward provision and current. So again, if it'd be useful for us to set that out for the committee, then I can arrange for us to bring the report forward on that.
Okay,
yeah,
appreciate that, Chair. Thank you.
No, David?
Thanks, Chair. Much appreciated. Firstly, Simon, thanks for the clarity on the clean air. Obviously, it is not a congestion zone whatsoever, and I'm glad you've reaffirmed that point, because I think, if I say so myself, that was a bit of a I'm not gonna suggest Councillor Evans slip that in, but anyway, I'm glad you've clarified that it's going to be a clean air zone. So that's very welcome. On the charging cables, I think that was again, that's a good point, because I've made this point before. Manchester is full of terrace streets. I've got now got an electric car, a plug-in hybrid car, and to charge it is rather an interesting experience, and it leaves me rather worried at times in terms of any issues it could cause. So again, we do need a GM-wide approach to this. I know in Stockport it's something that we're grappling with in terms of our parking strategy, but it's something that we're going to have to somehow, as a region, as a city region, grasp. And I think pretty quickly, because these vehicles cannot just be the preserves of those who are fortunate to have a drive, and we know now just how just having a two down terrace property for many people, and is a luxury in itself, in terms of how what house prices can be like. So this is something that does need to be grappled with. So just on the city centre strategy, again, it's just. The aims of the city centre strategy are really, really noble, but I'm going to come back to a point that I made last time, and I think I don't want this to get lost, because I appreciate it's very Manchester, it's for Manchester and Salford, and they're obviously it's their strategy, but in order for that strategy to be delivered, it's incumbent on all the other boroughs that surround the city centre to link into that in some way. For example, in Stockport, without addressing the congestion on the line in Stockport, there's no way that the journeys that want to be made, I think it's at 90% or so, clean journeys are going to be made without addressing the congestion on the line. And again, that comes back as well to the Manchester Recovery Task Force, which I'm not going to go into now, because we've not got enough time for that. But certainly, again, it links into ensuring that we get the infrastructure in the other boroughs as well, because ultimately, without that, we're not going to be able to deliver the city centre strategy. So that was one point I wanted to make, and then the final point again is just on, I guess, the 2040 strategy in general, and I'm going to come back to obviously in terms of what went on with GMSF and is now moving to a plan of the 9. Obviously Stockport decided to go it alone and is now having its own local plan. I'm not going to go into the into the minutiae of that again. I think people know full well where I stood on GMSF, but again, it's making the point that obviously with a plan of the 9 progressing and Stockport going it alone with a local plan, our local plan obviously needs to, and I guess the plan of the line, they do need to align with the Transport 2040 strategy. And just because we're not going forward with GMSF, I don't want us to be cut out on a limb. We still are a Greater Manchester local authority. I'm proud to be in Greater Manchester, and I don't want that to get lost. And we still need to make sure there is that link between everything. So whilst we're, I guess, outside the tent, so to speak, I still think we need to make sure that there is that link there still, and that there is some alignment there. So I'll leave it there. Thank you for indulging me, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Angeliki?
Oh, there we are. Thank you, Chair. I wanted to make a comment on the decarbonisation of transport. I am pretty disappointed with the contents of this report. Our city region has the long-term environmental ambition for carbon neutrality by 2038. It is vital that we act to reduce the impact of transport on the environment, and it's vital that we do this now. The ask is to reduce our carbon emissions by 50% in 5 years. And why I'm frustrated with this report is that I know that TFGM has got a number of projects that are going to be doing this, but you have somehow not put them on paper. So decarbonisation of transport accounts to about 30%, I think, of our emissions in Greater Manchester. And I know that we do a lot because we receive reports on it, on the Clean Air Plan, on electric charging points, on efforts to decarbonise new trams, on rapid transit, on Streets for All. We do a lot to increase the use of public transport. We do a lot and we spend a lot on active travel. We want, and we're doing things to establish zero emissions bus fleets, and also we are doing a lot to set out how we are going to decarbonise road freight. So, and this is why I'm disappointed, because you're not telling us, you're not telling our residents through a report how we are moving forward. So can I please ask for a smart report? How many things are we doing to reduce our carbon emissions, and by when? What I want to see is a route map of decarbonisation of our transports with values on carbon emissions. So can you please set out to the committee in a plain English smart report, what are we doing to reduce the carbon and environmental costs of our journeys, set out how we will do it, and if we are on track to reduce carbon emissions from transport by 50% in the next 5 years, and if not, what do we need from local authorities to do it, what do we need from the combined authority to do it, and what ultimately do we need from the government to be able to do it. Thank you.
Okay, who's answering that?
Shall I start? So I think, yeah, I understand that maybe carbon didn't come out sort of strongly in this report, but carbon is absolutely at the heart of all of our strategy documents, and they are focused on enabling sustainable journeys across the whole conurbation. So, as Councillor Stoyer said, there's a huge emphasis on how we can enable more walking and cycling, how we can improve and better integrate the quality of the public transport offer across the conurbation, and also how we can bring forward things like electric vehicle charging infrastructure to support that rapid transition. Of course, there's always more we can do, and we'll be looking very hard at how we bring forward the programme, how we sequence it, how we make sure that all the schemes are designed with very much with carbon at the heart of those designs, and how we can secure more funding to progress the sort of very progressive programme that we've set out in the delivery plan more quickly and at scale. So there's always more we can do, but carbon is very much at the heart of the whole strategy, alongside other ambitions around quality of life and supporting regeneration across GM. But very, very happy to come back with more detail on that through the year, and certainly will be a major focus of our work as COP26 approaches later in the autumn.
Okay, thank you. Steve?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I thought there might have been a little bit more information in the report myself, and generally, because obviously it does link to a further report, and given it's a virtual document in that sense, it wouldn't have been a huge document that needs to be sent to the post or anything like that. We could have seen that. You've been interested. I was particularly interested in, and will be in particularly the freight component of that over the coming months, because that's obviously critical of all transport. I think it is the movement of goods that is key to all of this. I mean, whenever you go on the motorway next, whenever you see the huge volumes of large HGVs everywhere, I think that's going to be one of the big factors. As much as we're are putting in the clean air plan, particularly to do, and I think private vehicles will be out of that, and that's because they are not the problem. There's these larger HGVs, particularly, although I know some biggest companies actually are on top of that, and they actually have more modern fleets. But it is obviously when we get into that second market and a lot of the where the companies distribute stuff between themselves, I think that is a concern. But we have got to look at more about that. I think there's huge implications actually how we get them. I was discussing this in the last year or so. And a number of potential options around that. So I'd like to see a lot more information about how we're planning to do this for GM. Well, it'll be a GM level, but it'll also link into what's happening around the rest of the country, because we can't just isolate country around GM. It's going to be how it links into the ports and the airports and stuff like that, and how those, if they actually start to function properly, of course, in that sense of it. But that is going to be really key to actually move forward to the whole of the transport strategy in my view, in that sense of it, getting how we get our goods moving, particularly. In that sense, thank you for that, Chair. And just a comment on Councillor Evans, he may have missed that in Trafford. We actually, at the back end of last year, I took a report to Executive on electric vehicle charging, and we just approved, he may have missed it again last night, at our budget setting meeting the other day. There was some £450,000 put into electric vehicle charging, and when that comes back from tender in the spring, we will have to look at implementing a whole range of schemes across the borough. And of course, we aren't doing that in isolation to TFGM, we are doing it in line with them. We obviously want to expand it significantly, but all our work will be joined up together in that sense of it, and how we can work with each other, absolutely. But ours will be looking at both town centres and indeed what we can do in residential areas, which will be actually key to that. And the points have been made actually how we can get them working streets where there are terraced houses and so forth. We have extensive discussions about that, and we've got to develop clear policies around that, and that will be coming up over the coming months. So I hope that Councillor Evans might want to look up that particular report, because a lot of information is there. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Steve. Nicola or Simon, do you want to come in on anything on that?
I think Councillor Adam makes a really important point in terms of freight, and obviously we've seen quite different activities taking place, particularly in terms of retail over the past 12 months. And I think we anticipate that some of those will continue into the future. So one aspect in particular that we're very keen to work on as part of the programme for Building Back Better is the whole issue around freight consolidation, and how we can use that to manage the amount of miles of freight on the road. And obviously we've seen quite a lot of that happening within the retail trade over the past 12 months. There are some early activities that we just started to get underway with a series of businesses in Manchester City Centre around waste freight consolidation in particular, and I think that's something that we will see grow quite significantly over the next few years alongside the measures within the Clean Air Plan.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'll bring in Warren. Then I'm going to move on.
Yeah, Chair, it's just the thing about electric vehicles, particularly electric buses. I know that one or two of the operators in Greater Manchester are experimenting with electric buses, and I'd like us to be kept in the loop, if you like, and given more information. How many operators are experimenting with electric buses? Are they also looking at other alternatives like hydrogen? And perhaps if we could get that report ready for the next subcommittee.
Okay, you can take that back. Yeah,
certainly, yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Good point, that one. Okay, so moving on. That's the end of today's meeting, but before I leave, I've been made aware that one of our former members, Norman Critchley, had passed away. So just before we leave, I just want to please ask all members to do a minute silence, please, for Norman. When I first got on the committee back in 2004, I actually sat outside of Norman, and ironically, when I became Mayor of Wigan, Norman was also the Mayor of Bolton. So quite interestingly, we got quite close. So in reality, can I please ask all members to acknowledge a minute silence, please? Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for that. I then declare the meeting ended, and I'll see you all soon. Please have a safe journey out and about if you're out. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.